Hey guys, welcome back to Well and Worthy Life podcast. I have got a returning guest. Actually, he's been on the podcast a few times. One of the few men we've had here, but Ed Parks is with me from Neuro Reserve. You may remember we have talked to him a few times. And so, Ed, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me here.
Hey, Deanna, it's awesome to see you. And it's just great to be back on here. And especially, I feel super privileged to be one of the few men on this podcast. I'm
Exactly.
seriously like feeling like I'm channeling all my inner femininity.
I
Just,
love it. I love it.
just,
I love it.
getting in that zone. So
Well, it's so great. And you have given us so much information, but one of the reasons that I wanted to have you back on is September is World Alzheimer's Month. And that is so near and dear to both of our hearts with my stepdad and your father. And we won't go into that story because we've covered that story a couple of times. So you guys, if you want to know the story about our fathers, you need to listen to one of the other episodes. We'll link to all the episodes in the show notes. But Ed is the founder of Neuro Reserve, and Neuro Reserve has the supplement Relevate. And it was founded out of really because of your relationship or your father and what happened with him. So we tell that whole
yeah,
story on a previous podcast, but it's a great supplement. And especially if you're concerned, and we all should be concerned about our brain health. I mean, let's be honest, right? I mean, our brain health is, to me, probably one of the most important things. I've talked about this before. Both my parents died of cancer, and that was bad. But watching my stepfather die from Lewy body dementia was far worse, because you lose them way before. And so that's really what really set me off on my health journey, really watching that.
that's great. I mean, not great about your family history, but
Yes.
great that you're doing something and that's really set you off and put you in a direction for health.
Mhm.
Yeah. So yeah. Hey, everybody. Yeah, I'm Ed Park, and like Deanna said, I founded a preventive nutrition company called Neuro Reserve, and we focus on healthy brain aging, and it's great to speak with you today about brain longevity. Let's
Yeah.
let's go with let's call it that.
Love
Because
that.
that's what it is. It's brain longevity, and this World Alzheimer's Month that you mentioned is just a wonderful time to spread awareness of this because like like you were saying, like age-related brain diseases, dementias, I mean, they hit at what we really are. Our brains they carry our personality, they carry our ability to think and learn, obviously, our memories, our feelings, our ability to love, right?
Mhm.
So it is everything to us. And so yeah, I mean, it's a huge part of my life as far as what motivates me. And yeah, I remember first bonding with you on the fact that, both our fathers, they passed away of a dementia, Lewy body especially.
Yeah.
So
And it's
uh,
so sad if and I know a lot of the listeners have family members that have had dementia or Alzheimer's, and just watching somebody disappear before your eyes, and just like you said, they lose that personality and those memories and just all of that stuff. And gosh, I mean, like, that's the last thing I want. And I think it's so sad for the people who are left, more so than that person who it's going through. I mean, I don't know. I think watching my stepfather, I will say he knew it was happening and he was very frustrated. But on the outside, watching this super smart man who had gone to Dartmouth, and his personality became kind of flat, and then just there was no rhyme or reason. He would remember some things and forget other things, and he had a lot of paranoia and delusions. It was just, like I said, really sad to watch, and that's the last thing I want. And I love this brain longevity. It's not about just living long, it's about living a long time healthy with
that's
all my
right.
brain functions. And we have to take care of our brain just like we take care of our bodies. A lot of people, and I'm guilty of this, I thought exercise was taking care of myself, I mean, really, but that's just one small part of our health, just one small part, really.
Yeah, actually that I think, yeah, that's message number one, I'd say, for this is that our brains age, they age just like everything else. And it's it flies under the radar because it's not like our skin where we could see our skin, or it's not like how we can feel our joints, getting older and we know something's up there, it's very insidious. So everybody should just be very alert about this. And there's a couple of other things about that now that I'm speaking about it for a moment here, about brain health and the impact of brain diseases. That's very special compared to, say, other chronic diseases like heart disease or hypertension or diabetes, right? And the thing here, I think there's a few things. The first thing is that for brain health, we don't have any really good biomarkers or markers to kind of look at. For like heart health, we got LDL, we got HDL, we can look at that. We got like, diabetes, we got A1C. We can look at that and say, oh, am I getting close to getting it or not? And stave it off. For brain health, we don't at this point. And so it kind of flies under that radar and sneaks up and hits you really hard. And the family's really hard. And I think the second thing is there are no good really drugs for brain diseases like Alzheimer's. So when you get there, it's not like you can get a statin drug for heart disease or something like that. It's you're
there.
There's really no options. Yeah, no
Right.
options, And like you were saying, it's just really tough. It has super high impact on the family. Everybody left, right? Because who's left but the caregivers, right? So they're the ones who are doing a lot of at-home care. A lot of it's not covered by insurance. So the financial impact is huge. So you got these three things that make it a very unique and very, very, I guess you could say special, but not special in a good way.
Right. Yeah, special in a bad way. Yeah.
Health area. So let's, and for women, there's a very special message in that too. And so we'll get past all the scary stuff first, but
That's
I promise
right,
we're gonna get some really good stuff, okay?
Yeah, some things
but-
that you can do
yeah,
about it.
yeah, exactly. But for women, I know that's a lot of your clients, obviously, in midlife, is that I think the second message, I guess, is that they are at higher risk. So for 2/3 of all Alzheimer's dementia cases are women. And there's certain reasons for that, but that's something that should not necessarily be something that scares women, but it should be a motivator, because obviously not all women and most women don't get dementia. And there's one of the big pieces of that, which you work on a lot with your clients, is the perimenopause and menopausal states and that period of life. And we got into this in a previous, I think, podcast about that critical time opportunity where women can really set themselves up really well for their future brain health, even as estrogen is dropping, and estrogen is very good for the brain, right? But even as that's dropping, they could really set themselves up really well for a wonderful second stage or second chapter of life, right? For their brain health. So anyway, I guess that's the second message, is that women out there, you really want to pay attention to this. And if you do, you can really set yourself up really well for great brain health, great memories, great living.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Exactly. And so we've talked about this a little bit, the Mediterranean diets, they're so powerful in the cognitive health. So what makes them so powerful?
Yeah. So the good news is that there's one of the most powerful diets. In fact, I should just say it is the most powerful diet for brain health, is a diet you've heard of already, probably. And it's the Mediterranean or Mediterranean type diets. So that's news there, because for a long time, people looked at it as like a cardiovascular type thing, like, oh, it's going to be good for your heart, right? But it's actually, around the past 10 years or so, research has shown it's extremely protective for the brain. So when we think about what a Mediterranean or Mediterranean-like diet is, what's the most brain healthy Mediterranean-like diet out there, right? And here's some of the foods in it. Okay, so you just want to really focus in on, and this kind of characterizes Mediterranean in general, right?
Right.
But the first thing is olive oil.
I knew
So
you were going to say that. I love
it's
olive
all,
oil too. It's so good.
yeah, like as your core
Mm-hmm.
cooking and dressing oil. If olive oil, you switch it over to that rather than maybe some of these other seed-based or corn-based oils,
Yes,
you're
for
in
sure.
great
Mhm.
shape if you switch over to that.
Mhm.
And that's something we can't fit in a supplement. Okay, so our
Mhm.
product is nutritional products and nutritional supplement.
Right.
We can't fit olive oil in there because you need spoonfuls
Right.
of it. It'll be great if you just have a nice big tablespoon every day of olive oil, or at least have it through other foods. So
Mhm.
but so that's a big piece of it, and the other thing is vegetables. Okay, so colorful vegetables, and that might seem a little kind of generic, but I'll drill down here and say for the brain in particular, it's dark leafy green vegetables.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, and I'm sure you're a nutritionist, and I'm speaking to the choir here to you, Deanna. But when it comes to leafy greens, the magnesium, the polyphenols, all those plant-based antioxidants that come with it, the lutein, which is good for your eyes, and also because it's an extension of your brain, it's good for your brain.
Mhm.
They're all very rich, those leafy green vegetables, in those nutrients. And I'm telling you, it's probably one of the most under eaten foods in the standard American diet. So
Yeah, because I think a lot of times people taste it and it's bitter. And so we've gotten, especially in the United States, we've gotten so used to everything being sweet, right? Because everything's sweet. And when that bitter taste, so I read something where that you have to try it 7 times. And you do acquire a taste for it, especially if it's something. And so I would encourage you to, if you haven't tried it in a while, try it again, keep trying it. And gosh, we can mix leafy greens in a smoothie. You can do all kinds of things where you don't even taste it if it's just really you can't handle it.
yeah, I mean, when I was like, I made a lot of changes in my diet about
Mhm.
5, 6 years ago for brain health, because before that, I was working in the pharmaceutical industry. I thought I knew everything. I didn't know anything about nutrition, right? Until I really decided I want to move into nutrition, I started learning about it. And so, I mean, here's my secret. When I first started eating more broccoli, I just sauteed it in olive oil, and I just
Yeah.
threw a whole bunch of salt on it, which is probably not a good thing, but I've been backing off ever since. So I'm backing off, there isn't as much salt, but I just went, okay, so that was a way to just kind of build
Mhm.
up my leafy green intake,
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
but so when it comes to fruits and vegetables, we want to go in that direction. For fruits, once again, colorful fruits, but for the brain in particular, berries are really important.
Yeah.
So they have those deep colors, the pinks and the purples and the
Mm.
blues of berries. And the reds, they are called anthocyanins, and
Mhm.
they are the pigments that make them those colors. But they are also super potent anti-inflammatories and antioxidants that
Mhm.
can exert their effect in the brain.
Mhm.
So when we think about fruits, think berries.
Mhm.
And I think when it comes to kind of meats, if you will, or
Mhm.
I guess they can call it flesh or whatever, it's
Mhm.
fish.
Yeah.
So, but in particular, cold water fish. So fish that need to come out of that North Atlantic or Alaska, or those areas there. But basically, what I'm talking about are salmon, herring, sardines, and anchovies. I know those aren't the favorite out there, but
Actually, I've really grown to where I love sardines. I've been eating a lot of salad niçoise, and I was over in France this summer, and
ooh,
it was amazing. And I've been eating more sardines. And actually, yesterday I went over to a girlfriend's house, and she made salad niçoise, and she put sardines on the side because not everybody's going to eat sardines, and they were so good, so good, so good.
well, you
So,
see everybody. So look, and also here's another tip. This is my own personal one. When I get the canned sardines, right?
mhm.
I like the ones with jalapeno. So
Oh, that's a great idea. I've
I've
never
seen
tried the ones with jalapeno.
oh, I get them over. I mean, my wife buys them every so often, and those packages of 6, and they're like,
Uh-huh.
soaked in olive oil with
Yeah.
jalapenos all over them. So
There you go. There you go. And
But
again, I think it is something that you can acquire a taste for, because a couple of years ago, there is no way I would touch a sardine for anything in the world. But then when I heard so much of the health benefits, I was like, well, and now I like it. So there you go.
Yeah, and so those fish are just obviously most people have heard already that the omega-3s, which are these healthy fats that are called DHA and EPA, those are very, very rich in these cold water fish. And the thing about DHA especially is that it is a building block. It is literally a structural beam, if you will, within the walls of our neurons in our brains. So not only does it do that, but it also has it's like an antenna, and it's signaling out there for anti-inflammatory action as well. So there's a lot of things that it does that are extremely important for the brain. And I don't know, just for a quick tidbit on the brain and why we keep talking about antioxidants, and anti-inflammatories and why they're so important for the brain, it's because, if you imagine your brain as an engine, and you really should, imagine it as an engine that's running all the time and will not turn off. It just doesn't turn off. And so your brain uses about 25 to 30% of your body's energy, of your overall energy usage. And that is after only being like 2 or 3% of your body weight. So it's punching way above its weight on energy usage. And think of that as a dynamo that just keeps turning and turning and turning and using energy. And of course, when you run an engine that fast and that long, there's going to be a lot of stress built up on it, and so that's why antioxidants, especially those colorful vegetables, are super, super important in the anti-inflammatories that omega-3s can bring. So just to give you a picture in your head, hopefully that'll help people, become more motivated.
That. Yeah. And
So,
I love that. And I think that it goes back to this whole thing that food is medicine, that it's very important how we nourish our body. And we talk about this all the time in my group, Revive Now, and about how important we've got to really take care of ourselves. When we were in our 20s and 30s, we got away with some things, but here it's the thing. It wasn't talked about as much. I don't think there was as much research or anything. Right now, it's more of a thing. I even feel like for the 20s and 30s out there, I mean, boy, y'all should really pay attention too, and really, start early with nourishing, using food as nourishment, not just something to eat and enjoy. Right. I mean, you want to enjoy it, and you can enjoy it. I mean, I love blueberries and salmon and all those good things. So anyway, I do think that we have to really pay attention about the way we fuel our body. And I think that's very interesting. What you said is how our brain uses so much of that energy compared to the rest of our body. That's a lot.
Yeah. We tend to think that we're using all of our energy when we're working out or in our big leg muscles or something like that. But in reality, it's our brain that's really, really kind of like scarfing up all that energy, basically, in a lot of the sugars in our body, whether or not that be simple or complex sugars and things like that. Our brain is really scavenging for all that, and trying to get as much of it as it can. So, but yeah, for you 20s and 30s folks out there, just a tidbit, there's very, very excellent research out there that shows that the brain begins to decline. And I don't mean to say decline in it. I don't mean to scare. I don't mean to scare. I mean to motivate, in the sense that our brains began decline, age-related issues in our late 20s. Basically, we peak for brain. I guess you could say, our innate brain performance peaks at our late 20s. And so what we need to do is we need to start pretty early, and that's why the sort of stuff runs under the radar so much, until like maybe people are in their 60s, So
yeah. Well, now I need to. Now I know why my youngest son and his wife, they're in their late 20s. They think they're smarter than everybody, but they probably are. They're at the top of their game right now. So they're going to decline from here. I'm going to send them this episode, let them know that.
And also, Also, us more mature folks, we got so when they did all those tests to see like what ages and when people like start to decline in their brain performance, the one thing that the older folks always did better on was this thing they called it had to do with vocabulary and world experience, basically wisdom. There was some sort of a metric there, and we were always leading. So
I like that. I like that a lot. Oh my
So,
goodness. Well, okay, so let's go to our next topic, visceral fat and its relationship to Alzheimer's and dementia. Well, first of all, before we even go there, let's tell everybody what visceral fat is, because I feel like that term, I've just really started hearing a ton about visceral fat in the last couple of years, but maybe really in the last year. So go ahead and tell them about visceral fat so that.
yeah, and great to be talking about this because I know it's important. It's a big part of Revive Now, and what you're doing for all sorts of people. And the thing is okay, in the simplest terms, visceral fat, it means belly fat. That's it. That's it. It is the big old complex, 50-cent word for belly fat and midsection fat, basically. And so that's visceral fat. And the thing about the visceral fat is that it matters a lot for brain health. So there's a great, you may be motivated already to have a great waistline, right? And to just work on that. But now you have another reason. And it's a
Right.
really,
Yeah.
really important reason.
Because I think a lot of people, a lot of women, I have a lot of women that come to me and they're like, oh, I've got this belly fat and I want to get rid of it. Not because they think so much about how they feel with it. Well, they don't feel good with it, but it's more about the looks and feels. They don't even relate that to the brain health. But it is, again, it goes back to this, that it's all related. And so we can't just work on one thing and think that's the ticket. It's all these things, and it's a domino effect of our overall health.
Yeah, that is, that is an awesome way to put it. It is the domino effect. And, when people start to build up the waistline or belly fat, it's the thing that people should know from a brain and cognitive standpoint is that obesity in midlife in general, right, is a risk factor, is a big risk factor for mild cognitive impairment, which is called MCI, and that's usually the leading point to Alzheimer's disease. So, and other types of, all being the leading type of dementia. And another important thing to keep in mind is that there are sex differences. Okay, so obese women, okay, in midlife, right, they have a greater risk of Alzheimer's later in life. And the very interesting thing, and you probably know this, kind of from all your experiences and what you do, women tend to carry fat, well, actually reasonably distributed throughout their bodies until menopause. And then when menopause happens, fat distribution starts to kind of can tend to concentrate more in the belly, right? And that's a function of a lot of things happening, right, in that period, perimenopause and menopause. And so the thing of, like, if I were to get on my soapbox for a second here, the thing about visceral fat that makes it kind of particularly dangerous is that it's not just a storage space. Of course it is. It's a storage space for fat. However, we really should be thinking of that visceral kind of belly fat as an additional organ in our body, okay, that is being built up, because what it has is, it's just not a lot of fat cells. It's actually, they build out connections to our nervous connections to our central nervous system. There's vasculature in there. There's some blood vessels. There's lots of different types of cells, not just fat cells. And all of them start to emit and pour out into our bloodstream lots of different biochemical signals that will start to cause big problems down the line, right? So we really want to kind of keep that. We really want to pay attention to that. And just like for one instance, they release a lot of inflammatory molecules. So people who tend to have a lot of belly fat tend to have basically a lot of, kind of chronic inflammation that's building up in the background. And also what a lot of those signals that they emit do, also they build up that insulin resistance and leading to type 2 diabetes. And once again, so there's that. And type 2 diabetes, once again, is a huge risk factor for Alzheimer's. So those all kind of build on each other. So it's just, once again, not meant to scare or to, cause, anybody to be discouraged. Actually, everybody has belly fat. Okay. So it's really all about, everybody. I mean, I was practicing hockey the other day with my son, and I was out there, doing like, lateral, like, strides and stuff and crossovers. So I felt so good about myself. Then I took my shirt off. I'm like, wait a second, man, you got to work on that belly fat, Ed. So,
Yeah.
but everybody has it. It's just a matter of making sure that we do things like a lot of the things that you tell your clients. It's a lot of these things to just make sure you keep it under control.
Mm-hmm. And isn't Alzheimer's even referred to a lot of times as type 3 diabetes?
It is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it has a lot to do with that. The fact that, type 2 diabetes is basically, insulin resistance,
Mm-hmm.
and insulin resistance in the brain for brain cells is bad for a lot of reasons. And the big reason is that one thing is that our brain uses so much energy, like we mentioned, and insulin allows cells to pull the sugars in to give the energy it needs. Now, of course, we all know if we don't get enough energy, basically, if we don't get enough food, we are going to die eventually if we just stop eating, or if we eat too little, we are going to starve and maybe die, right? So think about that at the really cellular level, like those little neurons, they're asking like, oh, I got to get fed. And now they can't get fed anymore because they're insulin resistant. That's partially it, because they got some other ways to get around that. But also insulin's very good about antioxidant effects and a lot of these other downstream effects as well. It does a lot of stuff. It's just not all about, maybe blood sugar or sugar in general. It's about a lot of things. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what about these people, they're listening and they're like, oh, my mother had Alzheimer's, or my grandmother had Alzheimer's, or maybe my father, whatever. So are they genetically disposed to having Alzheimer's?
Yeah. So one thing about Alzheimer's, like every other disease or every other advantage that we have in life, right? There's a genetic component to it. Okay. It doesn't seal our fate, but it does play a role. And the biggest genetic risk factor for Alzheimer's disease and later in life is called APOE4. And so that's an acronym for apolipoprotein E4. But what that is that everyone gets this particular gene called APOE. Okay. And it comes in 3 flavors, 2, 3, and 4. So that's why there's APOE2, APOE3, and APOE4. And you get 1 copy from each of your parents, kind of like, so if people imagine, when they did in high school, they did the genetics class and you see a little grid, a 2x2 grid, right? And there's your mom, your dad, and so you get 1 copy from your mom, 1 copy from your dad. And, if your parents, both one parent had 1 copy of APOE4, and another parent had 1 copy of APOE4, you have a 25% chance of having a single copy of APOE4, and maybe you have 1 copy of APOE3 and then another copy of APOE4, but basically you get a pair of these, right? And anybody who has either 1 copy of APOE4 or 2 are at higher risk of Alzheimer's disease later in life. And because we were speaking about visceral or belly fat, right? It plays a big role because what the APOE4 gene does, if you have 1 or 2 copies, is it changes the way in which your body metabolizes fats. So this all goes back and comes full circle to fats
There you
and
go.
lipids. and also insulin. So it's APOE is almost like a master gene. If you have an APOE4, what happens is that actually goes into your nucleus. So if you remember, like a little bit of like that high school biology, and that little part in the very center of cells where all the DNA is kind of scrunched up, right? It actually goes in there, and actually APOE4 can actually affect over 1,700 other genes that we have. And
Wow.
so it does a lot of other things, but the things that we do understand, well now, is that it affects the ability to properly process fats and bring them into the brain. And once again, remember, that's very important for those healthy fats. And also it affects cholesterol, and it also makes us more predisposed towards insulin resistance. And so now let's layer on one last thing, and that is women. And so
There you
women who
go.
have APOE4, one copy or two, tend to have a higher risk, even more so than men. So there's a sex difference there as well. So, if a woman has APOE4, one copy of it, then they would have maybe 3 times more chance of Alzheimer's later in life. If they have 2 copies, then they'll have maybe upwards of 10 to 15 times a greater risk, right? So that's a big deal,
Yeah.
So it's a big deal. And so when you think about that, you want to really think about, okay, how can I live in a way that can basically tamp this down as much as possible, because it has to do with fat processing, that we can attack it through nutrition. Inflammation, we can attack that through nutrition and also lifestyle, right? So really paying a lot of attention to that. Once again, this is not meant to scare, it's meant to motivate. And I think everybody should live like they have 1 or 2 copies of APOE4, this risk gene for Alzheimer's, because 25% of us do. That's a big number.
How would we know? Yeah, exactly. How would we know if we've got APOE4?
Yeah, what people can do is they can do a genetic test. That's one of, and
What about that 23andMe? Does that do that?
Yeah,
That's what I was
exactly.
thinking.
Yeah, you can choose like an option to have that like checked when they do it. But one thing I just say is, and everybody should think about it, carefully.
Just live like you do.
Yeah, exactly. You can just assume you have it and live really healthy, which is a great way to go. But sometimes people need extra motivation, and they're going to feel empowered by knowing. So doing the test is great. Other people might be like, hey, I don't want to know either way. It'll just create more anxiety and stress for me. I'm just going to try and live as healthy as I can. I don't want to know. And that's another way to go. But, there's a lot of genetic counselors out there who you can speak to, just to say, how should I think about this? Should I do it or not? And
right. Yeah. Because it could add a lot of anxiety to some people. I mean, for me, it motivates me. And I did do the 23andMe, and now I can't remember. I don't think I had the APOE4. I don't think I did. But
yeah, I think you have to ask for it. Yeah. Specifically.
But I mean, like I know that I want to live, a long time with a healthy brain. So I'm going to do some of the things that I know are important to be like that, because I mean, I do have a grandparent. My parents didn't live long enough because they both died of cancer, but my grandmother was in her 90s and she ended up with Alzheimer's. I mean, I thought it was pretty good that she lived in her 90s and did.
I mean, that's pretty darn
didn't
good,
get it till then. But still, it does mean that it's there. And gosh, let's face it, people are, we have the ability to live longer and longer now. So we really got to take care of our brains. I don't think people have really thought about that. I mean, when you think about it, the science has come a long way on making sure our bodies last a long time, right? But what about our brains? So we better do everything we can.
Exactly. It's all really new, also. I mean, a lot of people for a long time thought the brain is kind of like static. It's like just the way it is, and it's kind of sitting behind your skull, and if you lose some cells, you'll never get them back. And now we know, even in adults, there's neurogenesis, which is the creation and the birth of new brain cells. Obviously not as fast as like if you're a baby, but you can replace neurons if you live a healthy life. You can birth new ones, and you can create new connections by learning, obviously, and by curiosity and things like that. So there's just when it comes to nutrition and how it affects visceral fat, how it affects you can attack APOE4 with it. You can cut your likelihood of Alzheimer's in half, like 50%, by
Wow.
following a really nice Mediterranean diet,
Mhm.
really watching that nutrition, maybe even more than 50% if you're really focusing on it. So that's really good news. Anything you can cut in half
Yeah,
is
exactly. And
good
doesn't
news.
movement help your chances too? Exercise,
Yeah,
right?
exercise is like the other big lever to pull. Like those are the two big ones is our nutrition and also exercise.
Mhm.
And exercise, when it's that can cut your risk by just as much. And also, I mean, exercise is so it's really powerful, and especially for, like, let's say Parkinson's disease,
Mhm.
another neurodegenerative
Yeah,
disease, often linked to Lewy body dementia, right?
right.
High intensity interval training, resistance training, very important
Mhm.
for that.
Yeah.
So the strength that you work on with Revive Now, right?
Mhm.
Very important, super
Yeah.
important pillar to
Yeah,
build off of.
exactly. Exactly.
Mhm.
So, okay, we're going to wrap this up, but let's give everybody a few tips. Okay, first of all, Mediterranean diet for sure. Move your
Mhm.
body for sure. Your
Mhm.
supplement, how does that add?
Yeah. So, I mean, the reason why we developed it is because, with our medical advisors from like Cleveland Clinic and Rush University and Barrow Neurological, we all just got together and said, okay, at a practical standpoint, most of them, when they're treating patients, they realize that, and their family members ask questions about what can I do to prevent this? What can I do to maintain good health status for my brain? When they tell people, do your best, do the Mediterranean diet, people usually make it a little bit of the way there, but they don't make it all the way. And so at a practical standpoint, we wanted to develop Relevate, which is our product. We developed Relevate to make sure people can close the gaps for the most brain beneficial nutrients out of the Mediterranean diet and out of that, what they call the MIND diet, which is a Mediterranean diet also specifically for the brain. So there are 17 nutrients in there, specialized types of omega-3s that are actually intended to go after APOE4. We have B vitamins, those anthocyanin pigments that we talked about, with the
Mhm.
berries,
Mhm.
they're in there, the flavonols that are in those leafy green vegetables, right? The magnesium and the lutein and zeaxanthin, all those we pack in because those are the ones that people are getting the least of in the
Mhm.
standard American diet, because it's our default in the standard American diet, because we're surrounded, literally, I could go across the street here and hit like a McDonald's, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it's so easy to get that sort of food, which is calorie rich but nutrient poor,
Yeah.
that we realize that something like Relevate is important to just help people achieve that Mediterranean diet, 50% reduction in risk type of profile. That's
Yeah.
what we want to help people
Mhm.
get at. So that's what Relevate is. And yeah, I urge people to give it a try. Like obviously learn about it a little bit more. You can learn about it at neuroreserve.com. So that's NEURO reserve.com. And just see if it's something that it could help your diet and help your nutrition overall.
Yeah. And we'll link it in the show notes. And I've got a code that can give
Yeah.
everybody a discount. I think it's Deanna 15, but it'll all be in
Deanna
the show.
15.
Yeah, it'll all be in the show notes also. So okay, but y'all are great on Instagram and y'all always have blogs and all kinds of things. So tell everybody where they can find you so that they'll know. It's
Okay, it's pretty easy. So on our Instagram is where we do Instagram and Facebook, is where we do a lot of social media. So our Instagram handle it's Neuro Reserve. That's it. So NEURO Reserve. So all one word, Neuro Reserve. And for Facebook, it's the same thing, Neuro
perfect,
Reserve.
easy.
Yeah, and then also obviously our website, like I mentioned before. But for our social media, which is primarily Instagram and a little bit of Pinterest, what we do is we really try to focus on providing the latest research in brain nutrition and cognitive nutrition, but also ways outside of nutrition we can really strengthen our brain health. And that goes to things that, obviously, Deanna, you were talking about earlier, like the exercise and, other things like sleep and other lifestyle factors. So we really want to help people become equipped to live a brain healthy life. So
yes.
yeah.
And I love bringing this awareness, especially this month, with World Alzheimer's Month. So Ed, thank you so much for joining me yet again and educating everybody on more about brain health and bringing it, it is one of those things that unfortunately, I think that because we don't look at our brain every day, we forget that we have one and that we need to really work on that too. We look at ourselves in the mirror every day and we're like, especially as women, we're like, oh, I'm getting some wrinkles. I need some Botox. I need some, we forget that behind that skin, behind those wrinkles, we have this brain that we really need to work on.
Yeah, exactly. I look at myself in the mirror every morning. I go, oh man, Ed, you got to get on that Rogaine fast. I mean, you got to work on that, but it's easy to forget about the brain. But that's where all the action is in our brain. So
that's exactly right. Well, thank you again, Ed. I appreciate you being here today.
All right. Thank you, Deanna. I appreciate you also.